Thank you. Director Shoemaker.
Here.
Director Wyatt.
Here.
Director Salvaggio.
Here.
Thank you. Director Vidal.
Here.
Director Sloop. Thank you.
I just wanted to remind my fellow that if there's anything in the consent agenda, we get to that point, speak up and say that you would like to have something removed. Discussion on it. Oh.
Okay, so I'm going to start all over. Sorry about that. Before we get started with the special meeting, I just wanted to remind my fellow board members that if there's anything on the consent agenda that you want to have a discussion about, when we get to that point, you can just speak up and say that you would like to have one of those items removed for discussion. And we are going to start with our special meeting by electing a new chair. Do we have any nominations? Director Wyatt.
I would like to nominate Director Dan Shoemaker as chair.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All right. Did Director Salvaggio have any?
Oh, yeah.
Are you interested in the position? For Director
No.
Shoemaker.
I am, yes.
Okay. Director Salvaggio, do you have any comment?
Is there any particular term limit? Is there a particular reason why Chair Sloop is not going to continue chairing?
These types of positions are re-elected every year, so certainly someone could express their interest in serving for another year, but it does need to go through the same process every year.
Right.
I'll just
Okay.
make a comment. I think Director Shoemaker would make an excellent chair. He has years, decades of educational leadership experience. And I also think it's nice when we can spread the leadership experience amongst our fellow directors. So I just would like to comment on that.
Thank you.
I would also comment that I expressed an interest in that, and I had a conversation with Chair Sloop about this. I have great respect for the work that Chair Sloop has done, and I would not object to Chair Sloop continuing, but I did express an interest in this.
Thank you. All right. Kelly Douglas, please take a vote.
Thank you. Director Shoemaker. Director Wyatt.
Aye.
Director Salvaggio.
Aye.
Director Vidal.
Aye.
Director Sloop.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Congratulations.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, continuing the meeting, the next order of business would be to elect a vice chair. Director Vidal?
I would like to nominate Director Sloop for vice chair.
We have to figure out how to wear this thing. Comments?
I do have interest in being vice chair, just in case anybody's wondering. So,
Director Wyatt?
I very enthusiastically support this nomination. I think that your role as chair, you just did a phenomenal job, and I really appreciated how thoughtful you were in that role. The vice chair role, has a lot of behind the scenes work that I think that you'll excel at. So I'm really excited that you're interested in this position.
Director Fidel?
Oh, I keep. I just wanted to comment that I genuinely loved being vice chair, but it does require a lot of commitment and hours behind the scenes. And Director Sloop is and was an excellent chair, and I think she will more than excel at being vice chair. Just personally, I have a lot on my plate in my career, and I'm a mom and a wife as well. So I'm happy that Director Sloop has interest in this position.
Director Salvaggio, any comments?
Just that I'll be enthusiastic. Yes.
Very good. No more comments, then would you like to call the vote?
Thank you. Chair Shoemaker,
Yes.
Director Wyatt,
Aye.
Director Salvaggio,
Aye.
Director Vidal,
Aye.
Director Sloop. Thank you.
Okay, and before we continue, I just want to say I have a lot of respect for this entire board. Like, I really believe that all person on this board contribute greatly to the leadership, and what's more, anyone on this board could be in a formal leadership capacity, and I'd be completely comfortable with that. All right, so we will move on to the superintendent report.
Hey, thank you. Part of the report will be short because we do know we have a board retreat this afternoon in which I'll be sharing more information. I've given this commitment to provide enrollment update to you as often as possible. I'm sorry again that is small, but we're watching enrollment very closely since we've been getting forecast enrollment from Flow Analytics and given decisions that we've had to make as a school district. So this is enrollment for the 26-27 year as of today. We know that families are at different places in transition, and some families have not either moved here yet, or if they're moving away, maybe perhaps not unenrolled their students. We still have the months of July and August, and when our full office teams come back to work in August, that's when more enrollment usually picks up, as well as we take note of other changes, but we're watching it nonetheless. And so as you can see there, we are still, we're about 8,300 students, and continuing along that middle forecast that Flow Analytics had, and actually a little bit below that. But again, this is July, so I think we'll have a much clearer picture of where we are according to the forecast when we get to August. If you look at the next slide, I have pulled out primary schools in particular because that's where we made those shifts with our schools. So you can see in 2025-26, that was the October enrollment that was provided to the state. So one point in time, we know it fluctuates up and down throughout the year. And then as of the numbers that I was able to pull out of our system this week, you can see the impact there. So when we look at the total last year, 3,398, and where we sit right now, 3,205, we are about 190 less in primary, but again, we are not yet fully completed with our enrollment process. Flow Analytics has us forecasted for about 3,358, so we'll see how close to that forecast we actually are. But I think overall, when we step back and not get too consumed by the details, the overall picture is the district is declining in enrollment. And it's evident in smaller cohorts coming in as those larger cohorts graduate out. And you heard that in the report last year. And that's still coming to bear for our district as well as other districts in Oregon. And there is a national trend given birth rates and migration into the state, and inflation and housing costs and all of those trends that we were looking at. Next, this is my last slide. So I have a very short report. And then I'm going to invite Andrew to come up and speak. But in terms, I always try and give you a highlight of what's been happening in the district. Well, it's summer. So we don't have formal school, but we do have some aspects of what we call summer schooling. For our high school, this summer, all we are offering is a trigonometry course for students who want to move ahead in that course selection. That is fee-based. And then in primary school, we have a different model for our summer school because of the transitions of our primary schools this year, consolidating 2, opening 1, but also having new tenants moving into 2 of our schools meant a lot of time by our staff in boxing up, effectively moving, cleaning out, helping others make sure they're moving in has meant that their time and attention is really directed at some very specific projects. And to have another whole full in-person schooling going on was just too much to ask of staff. So we have moved it to a virtual model with an invitation for needs-based students to participate. Very much like we did during COVID, where it has synchronous as well as asynchronous components. So a group of children do have a teacher who greets them every morning on their laptop and does a little lesson with them. Then they do some synchronous work through Lexia and some literacy modules where we can track their progress and growth. And then they come back on for remaining parts of the lesson. And the great thing about this is we could actually offer it all summer long instead of just 4 weeks. And it's not contingent on the students being at home. We have some students who were Zooming in from Wisconsin or from the East Coast, wherever they were on vacation, they took their laptop and still had their hour of literacy instruction. It also gives, we had more staff interested and able to participate in the teaching of it because they could do it in a more flexible way. So we're going to collect some data and information from parents to see how they experience that. We'll have, of course, data from pre and post for how they made growth in their literacy and reading levels, and then see what we can learn from this. But it is our second best attempt at providing summer learning for some students who really needed it. And with that, then I'm going to yield the rest of my time and invite Andrew Kihlstrom to come up and share with you some of the ways that we are expanding and being creative with communication strategies. Particularly, this report will focus on the capital bond. We heard feedback from our long-range planning committee. Because this bond has so many more small projects integral at each school site, and a lot of investment in that process, we know that folks are very eager and interested to see how those projects move across a timeline and unfold. So with that, Andrew.
Dr. Ludwig laid out there. This plan that you're looking at was heavily informed and influenced by a really robust conversation that we had at a previous long-range planning committee meeting. That group expressed great interest in just sharing the great work that we're doing because of the generosity of our community with these construction projects across the district, and wanting to share that with interested community members as much as possible. So in the memo you have in front of you is kind of the bullet points of the key strategies and kind of channels that we'll utilize to get that information out to the public. And really our goal is to create as many access points as possible based on the level of interest that a community member might have. So if you're someone who is just kind of interested in passively following construction on social media, that's great. That's an option for you. If you're someone who is really interested in what's happening at your school specifically, we want to make sure that you know where to go on our bond website to find those school-specific or theme-specific projects. And then if you're someone who's really loves this work and is excited about the bond as a whole, if you want to follow every detail, you can actually sign up for those bond-specific updates and get that. So our primary way of communicating bond news is through our Bond Parent Square community group. It's like an e-blast. Anyone in the community can sign up for it. It's very easy to do. We already have close to 1,000 community members signed up for that. That's where we send out big project updates. So when there's big developments with an example being turf fields at Wilsonville and Westland High School has been the most recent kind of big example of that. And then with our own, internal stakeholders, so our parent guardians, our students, our staff, we can do that through both our district newsletter and our school newsletters. So our bond website, of course, serves as kind of the central location hub for those bond project updates, information, cost details, pictures, videos, etc. We have organized the bones of that website. It is live. We have information up there, and in the next week, the community can expect to see a lot more information populated on there as work has gotten underway this summer as the bond team has really hit the ground running. So we've organized those projects both by school location or district facility, as well as the theme that it's tied to. So if you call back to that bond summit and kind of that work leading up to the November election, we got great feedback from the community that they appreciated it organized in that way. It was easy for them to follow and gave them a kind of a sense of the full scope of the bond. So we're planning to kind of follow that format again as we roll information out over the next 5 years. We got feedback from our long range planning committee members that it doesn't always have to be super detailed information, but nuts and bolts, quick updates, bullet points, pictures, as much as we can get that out to the community, the better. So that's really what we plan to do in our regular district newsletter, our school newsletters, and we will do a standalone monthly bond newsletter for community members who are interested in that level of detail. Of course, we'll utilize social media, as we always do. That bond quarterly report is something years ago as a reporter that I always leaned heavily on. There's a lot of great detail in that report that our bond team continues to put that together, and that's presented at quarterly long range planning meetings, and it is available on that bond website. And then we do have banners that have been ordered, and they'll be hung at all our school locations with a reminder to the community that there's construction work happening thanks to the generosity of our taxpayers. And there's a QR code where they can go look at projects specific to that location or the larger district. Of course, we collaborate with our cities. We often get information in their newsletters, the Boone's Ferry Messenger, and then we partner with Carpenter Media, our local newspapers, to get updates in there from time to time too. So happy to answer any questions you might have about this plan or any feedback to how we can get that word out.
Whoop.
Yeah, so it's a standalone website. If you go to any of our school websites and you go to that top left corner and you see our schools, where you can go to Athey Creek Middle School or Boone's Ferry Primary, there's actually a 2025 capital bond website in that drop down, and it is its own dedicated website for bond information.
I just wanted to thank you for taking the long range planning suggestions and putting them into action. I really appreciate all these different communication avenues. So thanks so much, Andrew.
Yeah, of course.
Director Wyatt.
I just was refreshing my knowledge about the eBlast sign up, and it really is as simple as putting your email address in, selecting all the topics, all the schools you're interested in, and then clicking submit. It is a super simple way to get a lot of information, and I know that especially after these board meetings, the summary that you send is, a comprehensive summary of everything happening at board meetings. But then I'm really excited about being able to look at the specific school level capital projects. But then I also note that there is a capital bond newsletter as well. So I feel like you're kind of hitting this information sharing from all sides, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
I don't want to waste time, but I just want to echo what my colleague said about, I think we've heard a lot about what we want to see in terms of transparency in the past few months, and looks like you've taken it and are implementing and executing. So thank you so much.
As the board liaison to the Long Range Planning Committee. This absolutely reflects the desires of the committee, as well as what I think we heard at the summit and what we've been hearing from the community. So thank you for that work. Dr. Ludwig, any comments?
I think we've mentioned several times that this is kind of a unique bond in that it, it's a bond that in a long time now doesn't have a school rebuild or a new school on it. And it really is focused on maintaining current facilities. And to that end, we engaged a lot of stakeholder groups even before we had the bond summit. And there were about 7 or 8 task force groups that gave their input on what they were hoping would be on the bond. They're very invested now in seeing the outcomes of that. And to that end, it's just requiring a different type of ongoing communication because there's so many small projects that folks can point to. They were asked for their input on it and they're interested in seeing the progress with it. And as you mentioned, Director Wyatt, every school is getting projects and I think folks are excited to see those come to fruition. So thank you, Andrew, for your work. Also, you saw in the memo that there's a bond oversight committee in addition to the long range planning committee, and they do meet regularly to get reports on how the finances are being accounted for and how the projects are moving through their timeline.
So next up is consent agenda, and before we have a motion on that, are there any items that any directors would like to pull from the consent agenda? Director Sloop. Yeah, so would our process be to pull it right now? Okay, then let's pull that. Without objection, unless I hear objection, let's pull the board meeting dates schedule.
I move we approve the consent agenda minus item B.
I second.
Discussion about, okay, yeah, right, exactly. Will you call the roll?
Thank you. Chair Shoemaker,
Yes.
Director Wyatt,
Yes.
Director Salvaggio,
Yes.
Director Vidal,
Yes.
Vice Chair Sloop.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, so we have adopted the consent agenda minus the discussion for the board meeting dates. Director Sloop, do you want to say a few things about meeting dates?
Okay, so to start off, the very first meeting in August, I will be out of town and I will not have access to cell phone reception or Wi-Fi to even Zoom in. So I was wondering if we could bump it to the week prior, August 10th. And that's just because of some potential agenda items that will be board business in August.
Yeah. How do we feel about the 10th? Director Wyatt? Yeah, can we show a, yeah, thumbs up to me. We're looking at calendars.
Yeah.
Director Vidal, looks like we have all 5 board members could move that date to the 10th. Right? You're okay, and you're okay, Dr. Ludwig, with that?
Yeah, the reason we placed it there is we have our leadership retreat those days just prior, and we're working really hard to focus on that 3-day retreat. We also know that you want memos before the weekend and things posted. As long as that meeting is pretty slim in terms of its content or topics, which I think it will be since you're doing so much today, I think we can, I'm looking at Kelly, I think we can manage that. And if staff, knowing ahead of time can get those memos, posted before even the leadership retreat, then we'll feel that we can focus on that and not be working also on a board.
And eyeballing some staff in the audience, they also seem to think that this is doable.
Yeah.
Okay, then can we make that adjustment? Yeah. Thank you.
And that was just really to provide the explanation of why we had selected the 17th.
Yeah, sure.
But we can make the 10th work, absolutely.
Yeah, well, probably not the last time we ask you to do something that's hard. Thank you for doing that, for making that adjustment.
Of course. Yeah. We want the board here, and we know how much you already adjust and flex and accommodate to meet the schedule of staff. So we're happy to do that.
Anybody noticing any other dates on there that potentially challenging?
I was just hoping that Director Sloop was just adjusting for sports schedules, but I think that is a thing of the past, so.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I see no other concerns. We ready to move on to public comment then? Or do we? Oh, should we make the motion for adoption of the calendar?
I move that we adopt the 2026-2027 school year meeting date calendar
Can you say with the change of that one date?
with the change of that one date from August 17th to August 10th.
I second.
All right, I think we're ready for a call on that.
Thank you. Chair Shoemaker,
Aye.
Director Wyatt.
Aye.
Director Salvaggio,
I,
Director Vidal,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sloop.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to public comment now, and and we have just one person signed up, and that would be Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark, I am not going to read all of that. I will spare you that for today. Yes, it would be my first time, and I'm gonna defer that to another time. Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Andrew Clark, a parent here in West Linn-Wilsonville. I wanted to speak today about the proposed changes to the district complaint process. As someone who has firsthand experience with it, I've watched other families go through that process. It can be incredibly challenging. My primary concern is what appears to be a removal of the board from that process, to where the board really only is seeing complaints that are about them, but not necessarily about things that are happening in our schools. The one thing I've learned through this process is it is a legal, formal process. If one thing is out of line, denied, and it gets pushed aside when it comes to that complaint. But the reality is that those complaints can also be symptoms of bigger problems, bigger issues, things like racism, things like bullying, things that are happening in our schools that I do believe the board should be aware of, because it could lead to potential changes. It may not resolve that particular situation. It may not give that family what they're looking for, but it can lead to bigger change for the district. And I do think it is important for the board to have some sort of visibility to what's happening there. You know, and you look at other districts around us, there is a little bit of difference depending on the district. You look at Beaverton, they also have the escalation from the superintendent to the board chair and vice chair, to kind of review that and to decide if they want to take that complaint to the full board for discussion, if they feel it warrants that, or if it's okay, they need to just move on to the next stage, which is the state. I think that's a really important review as a part of the process. I think it helps increase visibility, transparency, to make sure that we just know what's happening in our schools. You know, if you look at a district like Portland, they actually go straight to the state in the process. However, they've committed to being able to provide reports to the board, to kind of say, hey, here's what's happening, here's what we're seeing, these are the complaints and what it looks like. So there is still that transparency and visibility that I feel is missing from what is being proposed today in that process. I do think it's super important. I mean, we hear transparency a lot over the last year, and obviously it does mean things to different people, but I do think that those doors, as a public representative of our district, as the board, that you should be seeing what these complaints are. I know through that process, it is incredibly challenging. And if a parent is willing to go to the school, go to the district, go to the superintendent and go there, it is something that is very important to them. And I do feel that they deserve that formal review from the board, from the community elected representative, to help make that decision and to help drive that understanding for that commitment. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. We will move on to board business, and we're going to hear from Department of Operations next. Mr. Douglas.
Morning, board. The board received a memo and packet around this resolution, which relates to the Awesome grant. In brief, this is an additional funding opportunity through the state to help support local school districts in the passage of bonds. It provides a level of matching funds that do not come from the local general obligation bond indebtedness to the community. The district was awarded $6.126 million with this grant. And we are following all of the steps to secure that money. And the next step here is the board approving the agreement and authorizing staff to execute it so that we can submit it to the state. So we've passed the bond, we've ticked all the boxes for legal counsel review, for the sale of bonds and so forth. And so we're now at this step. We do have expert guidance from our bond counsel every step of the way to make sure we're dotting the i's and crossing the t's. And staff are confident in this agreement. Happy to address any questions the board may have.
Questions? Comments? Director Sabaggia.
I have a comment about this, and I apologize for not getting to anyone earlier, but I was reading over the state grant agreement in the wee hours of the morning. And I am a bit perturbed because I recall back last year, we had been looking at a budget shortfall. And I asked several people if it was possible to execute the allowance in Oregon Administrative Rules 581-027-025, whereby the OXIM grant was used to reimburse the district's general fund for prior capital costs that we had incurred in previous years. And I was told time and again that, gosh, there's no mechanism for that. It's off the table. And then in section 4, sub D, sub 2 of the state grant agreement, it looks like there is a allowance for ODE to waive certain disbursement conditions upon appeal of the district. I'm going to vote yes on this, and I'm going to support the money being spent where it's been designated to be spent. But I am disappointed that we didn't have a full discussion about our options last year with regard to the OXIM dollars. Because apparently in the state's grant agreement, they are willing to be much more flexible than was conveyed to me. So I will be a yes on this, but I just wanted to put that on the record.
May I address the definition of reimbursement in this agreement? So the grant agreement funding is a little different than often is the case. In this case, the district is obligated to spend the original bond principal on the OXIM grant eligible expenditures and then seek reimbursement of those costs from the state. And so that reimbursement language, which I tried to quickly read as we were standing here, is referencing that reimbursement after the election. It's for the reimbursement of the costs incurred to perform the OXIM grant work, rather than considering reimbursement of past capital expenditures.
And I think while perhaps folks are looking at that, I just do want to clarify that we had a board work session where we heard back the results of the bond summit, and the long range planning committee had given a recommendation about a bond amount, if you recall that. And then the board had quite a discussion around setting a bond amount as well as the projects. And you did some deliberating about which projects. And then when it came to the topic of the OXIM grant, the board did specify in a public meeting that they wanted the OXIM grant to be used towards a specific project. And so there was discussion and decision at that time for it to go towards a project. In the future, when an awesome grant is, again, contemplated or awarded, I think that would be the time again to discern, is it for one project, several projects, or the wishes of the board on how that money to be spent. But I think because the board made that decision for that project, we need to keep it designated. And I believe it's going towards, is it going towards Wood Middle School, or what's the project going towards?
Yes, a variety of improvements at Wood Middle
Yeah.
School. Modernizing and renovating interior and exterior, including the roofing, other elements of building envelope, mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, renovating a number of classrooms, various safety and security upgrades, accessibility upgrades, and some new equipment.
So that those weren't just ideas decided by the staff, it was identified by the board at the time. So.
Yes, please.
Just to clarify, the administrative rule in question in sub 4 clarifies that the reimbursement may apply to capital costs incurred in prior to the funding cycle in which the OXIM grant was awarded.
I think, are we ready for a motion? Or, Yep.
I'm happy to move if there's no further discussion.
I can make the motion so I move to adopt resolution 2026-3, approving the form of the awesome grant agreement and authorizing staff to execute the grant agreement.
Second.
Director Wyatt.
I will be supporting this motion, and I was actually reflecting on how when we were discussing the bond, Director Vidal was such a strong advocate for the enhancements and the upgrades that we need to make at Wood Middle School. And I think, that is really what sticks with me, and the ability for us to run the bond campaign and talk about the matching grant amount, and then being able to direct it to the oldest middle school in Wilsonville was really important to me at the time when we were selecting that bond amount. And I just want to thank Director Vidal for always being such a strong advocate for our Wilsonville facilities.
Other comments? I'm just going to add that in discussions I had at both at the bond during the bond campaign with community members, this really felt like a promise to our community, right? And encouragement, and it's pretty powerful. So I appreciate the work that goes into applying for and getting this grant. All right, are we ready for let's call it?
Thank you. Chair Shoemaker,
Yes.
Director Wyatt,
Aye.
Director Salvaggio,
Aye.
Director Vidal,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sloop.
Aye.
Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you.
I believe we're at Department of Teaching and Learning, and Dr. Ludwig, it looks like you're going to be leading this.
Thank you. I usually have a colleague up here, but we weren't sure with the summer who was going to be in town. We had some folks with some agendas that they said, we're not sure we're going to be there. And I said, I will be there to present it. And as I look out, I see two colleagues who were able to make it and could be up here, but I will go ahead and discuss this item. Back in October of the last school year, 25-26, we did come before you. At that time, Dr. Soyson brought a request to postpone the social studies curriculum renewal process 1 year. As we know, the state provides that postponement for 2 years, given that we were coming off of some pretty heavy core content renewal processes, and teachers are still working to implement those, literacy and math, as well as we knew that science and health were happening, those adoption processes. There was the request to push that off also from happening last year, and for that process to happen this year in 26-27. The board did approve that in October, and I'm coming to you to now request a 1-year extension. So we are still within the timeline provided by ODE for a 2-year postponement. And so the rationale is within the memo. It's the same as it stands in October for those reasons. One of the new reasons to postpone it another year is given the extensive work we've been doing around calibrating multi-tiered systems of support based on listening sessions from last year around inclusive practices, feedback we've heard around academic interventions, some work we want to do around attendance. We had extensive listening sessions and feedback from staff, and we really would like to prioritize and focus on that action plan this year, and we know it will require time and attention. And so rather than stretch ourselves too thin with the competing process of another core content area, we'd like to take advantage of ODE's provision for a 2-year postponement and respectfully ask the board to approve that extension.
Just as a point of order, do we prefer the motion prior to discussion? Okay, then do we have a motion? Director Sloop.
I move that the West Linn-Wilsonville School Board postpone the adoption process of K through 12 social studies instructional materials until the 27-28 school year with new materials in classroom in the fall of 2028.
I second.
Any discussion? Director Sloop.
I do support postponing, considering what Dr. Ludwig just said with the core curriculums of the literacy and math that are just been recently adopted. And then this past academic year was also health and science. And with the urban collaborative, it's a lot because we all know the process and the dedication that our teachers and staff put towards the selecting the curriculum. And it's very time consuming. And I just feel that I don't want to put that extra burden on them where they're just being spread too thin. So I'll support the postponement.
Okay. Heather, yes. Director Vidal.
I also support the postponement, especially after, speaking with the cabinet and how much work they already have on their plates. And I agree that focusing on the urban collaborative suggestions is going to be really important this year. I just have a question to Dr. Ludwig, and I apologize if you already mentioned this, but is there supplemental social studies information available to students and teachers if they need it?
Yeah, so in the memo, and I think you have a copy of that on the back side, it does list what material before that chart. So does it have it there? It does list the materials that we are currently using.
Yes.
And recognizes that in 2022, we did update some materials. This was even mid-adoption year to our high schools upon their request. And that serves as supplemental. It doesn't need to come to the board as core content text reference material, as well as new atlases. Most of our social studies instruction is also, because it has to be current affairs and very up to date. We do use digital reference materials. Also in primary school, it's very connected to literature that students read. So we have fictional, but also non-fictional. A lot of our non-fiction material is very connected to social studies, as well as anthologies and biographies. But so the renewal of the ELA adoption also did update some of those social studies access to those themes. But what this full process does is it actually also reviews the updated standards, which were revised by ODE and finalized in 2024. So they're not too far off. And so we have access to those. It doesn't stop a teacher from referencing those. They're posted on ODE's website, but we'll go through the process of making sure we're calibrated and updated in our materials as well, those standards.
Thank you. Other discussion? I'm going to make a quick comment that sometimes we have more community interest in certain adoptions than in others, but they're all hugely important. And I think most of us looking at the United States today would say social studies instruction is incredibly important. That said, I would note that postponement is in no way a sign of sloppiness on the part of a district. It's a very regular. I think the reason the state allows for that is because exactly of the things that we're talking about here, right? There is so much work that goes into some adoptions, and the implementation that we're putting so much on teachers when they have to, particularly at the primary level, they have multiple subjects. So the work that they put in the course of a year of a new adoption, and to frankly, to give them a little bit of space, I think makes perfect sense. So I'm completely in favor of this. And I think we are ready for the call.
Chair Shoemaker.
Yes.
Director Wyatt.
Aye.
Director Salvaggio.
Aye.
Director Vidal.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sloop.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that support, and we will let our administrators know this outcome.
So next up, we are going to continue our discussion of, so this is the Bolton Historic Registry nomination, right? Am I in the right spot here? And I'm going to let Dr. Ludwig lead this discussion.
Thank you. And just to clarify, this is a first that
Yes.
we're bringing this forward formally to the full board in a public meeting. So you've not had this on an agenda prior to this meeting. But given just where we are with this, I think it's important to archive and to historically kind of point to the board having an opportunity to discuss this as a collective group and to note its occurrence. You have a memo from me kind of outlining the chronology of this. We became aware that some community members were interested in putting forward a nomination of Bolton School to the National Historic Register. There is a very formal process for that includes hearings before several boards, including the local one, the Westland Historic Review Board, and then also then the what's called the State Advisory Committee on Historic Preservations, or SACHP. There's also then the state, another acronym very close to that, but the State Committee for Preservation called SHPO. And so there are these two groups that work in tandem, and again, a very formal process. Because our schools are considered public buildings, different from then a private residence or a private company building. Anyone can nominate a public structure or facility for consideration. It is not our ability as a school district to impede or to stop that nomination, but there is a process at which we, as the owners of that public facility, can then provide comment. And we entered into the process at that point in which we could, which was at the state level. And just want to recognize that we know firsthand and through all of our listening sessions the last 2 years, and we know just on a regular basis that families love our schools. They love the teachers, the community action that happens around schools, the learning that takes place, and they also have a lot of care and respect for the facilities in which that learning happens. And we know that because we pass capital bonds on a regular basis, and it's a gesture in which the community wants us to take care of these facilities and build new ones, and they understand that learning takes place in these places. And so we want to just recognize the generous intent of these community members to want to recognize a school that they love, and just how honoring that is that folks would want to take the time to do that. And so just want to share that on behalf of the staff, we really appreciate that recognition and the generosity of that spirit. and the time and attention to really document and note how important Bolton School has been over the decades to so many children and families. And I think I would say that every school has that same sentiment, whether it's newly built or newerly built, and as well as one that has been in the district for even over a century. In terms of a district's position on a recognition or establishment of a facility, an active facility on the historic register, we do need to unfortunately take a position that it's not something we would initiate or want to, or be able to work through. And I outline in the memo some of those reasons that do make it challenging for an active school building to also be on the historic register. And those are one around the need to continue to ensure that everything we do in a facility moves towards academic excellence, up-to-date technology, modern access for students with their academics, and then parity across schools as much as possible, so that a family with children at one school can expect certain type of curriculum and methodology and pedagogy as the families of another school. The second is around safety and security. And where we are today in public schools is very different than even when I started here in the district 26 years ago. We have security protocols that we've never had before. We have installed more cameras. We have key codes and upgraded alarm systems. We have secure vestibules. We have intrusion glass around active shooter mitigation. Just our buildings are more than just open places for the public to come in and out and support learning. There actually is an expectation by our families that we have a level of security, which does require changing buildings and retrofitting them to always the newest technology around that security and those types of components, as well as safety around just environmental hazards or those kind of components require us to always use to abate the buildings or retrofit them to make sure that they are environmentally safe for children. And then the last is just around budget and public funding, that we are required by law to take the lowest bid for projects. And that is about ensuring that we are using tax funds in a way that is conservative and budget friendly, and sometimes in projects that would then require more of a historical preservation, there is a higher criteria around the type of materials or labor or matching of certain aesthetics that is often more challenging with a budget and may not be the same that we would do for another building. And so we do have some experience around that with this building and in conversations with other school districts or other public venues that do have to hold to that higher standard around historic preservation. So for those reasons, and not at all because we don't value every one of our schools and believe they have had great historic and cultural significance in the life of a community, but because we are expecting all of our buildings to stay active with children in them and be active school buildings, even the two that we have consolidate will have children and school work happening and learning taking place, and an expectation around safety and security this fall. Unfortunately, it is a nomination that we have submitted an objection to. We did hire a third-party objective preservation consultancy group. This is what they do. They look at buildings and facilities to see if they would meet the criteria on a historic register. There are specific criteria. And they provided a report. We weren't sure what outcome they would come at. We know we had our rationale. And they did provide a report, and in their opinion, their professional opinion as historians, they do not believe that Bolton School as it stands today qualifies for the threshold under criteria A, education, or criteria C, architecture. And we did submit that to both of those, both the SACHP as well as to SHPO, SHPO, around just some evidence around how we felt we had already altered that school over the decades and did not feel it qualified. They held a meeting on June 26th, the committee. They did table their decision. It's called deferring it, asking the nominating party to provide some more evidence around what they believe were qualifying factors. And so there's a time then that's given. That also is time for others to come forward with public comment during that process, or if the district would like to ask Continuum, which was a third party, to do more of an in-depth study and add some more supporting material, which we could do. But because this is going on, I think it's important that you are aware, you were made aware through emails and through communication from me. It gives you the opportunity, because you are a group that can't have serial communication outside of public meeting, to have some questions for me or for staff, discussion amongst yourselves. And then there's no decision for today. This is just information being provided to the board. And but what I am asking for is if there is some different direction that you would like staff to take, that I do need to hear that. Otherwise, we will continue, as I've shared in the memo, with what the district's position is, which is that we would prefer our active school buildings not be on historic registers for those 3 reasons. So.
Dr. Ludwig, discussion? Director Vidal?
Thank you so much. I agree with the position of the school district, and I just would like to discuss why. So while, well, I agree, because I am placing the bodily safety of our students and staff over the preservation of this building. And I would just like to discuss that a little bit as a mother and as a school board member. So I take the safety of our students and staff to be preeminent. And I am concerned if this school is put on the historic registry, that we wouldn't be able to take the measures necessary to protect our students and staff from not only intruders, but from also harms from the environment. And so first off, we have special glass in our school vestibules throughout the district to protect our students from active shooters, which has been mentioned today. I'm concerned if we put Bolton on the historic registry, that there may be some advances in protecting our schools that could be used that we may not use in this building because of that. Given where we are on the West Coast, there are also some seismic activity that we need to recognize could happen in Oregon. And I'm concerned that seismic upgrades to the building could not be made if it's put on the historic registry. Also, as the community knows, the Clackamas ESD is going to be using Bolton, and the kiddos that attend Bolton, some of them may have high acuity needs that require accessibility that's unique to those students. And so I'm concerned that there may be accessible building updates modifications rather, that need to be made for not only the Clackamas ESD students, but any student in the future, given our students' high acuity needs. And then lastly, I just want to touch on something that's very important to our communities, which is energy efficiency. So when we put a building on the historic registry, we wouldn't be able to update windows. We wouldn't be able to update other energy systems within the building if it's put on the historic registry. And as we know, We haven't gotten there, well, we have gotten there this summer with like 90-degree temperatures, but as temperatures get high, putting students in a building and staff that we can't moderate the temperature can be difficult. And I don't want to have to cancel school or modify a school day because it's difficult to control the temperature in the building. So for all those reasons, I'm going to support the district in its contention to not have this building put on the historic registry.
Discussion? Director Sloop. I'm sorry, Vice Chair Sloop.
Yes, so after researching more about what does the National Registry of Historic Places entail, as I've mentioned before, I did go to Bolton when it was a grade school, 5th through 8th grade, and it is very different architecturally than what it was back when I was there in the 70s. There was a fire that destroyed the upper part of Bolton, like a third of the building. There were a bunch of glass blocks up on the top of the gym for light, and I think other places of the building as well. And those are all removed. They're not there anymore. And then the library was just a typical one level, kind of like an oversized classroom up in the upper hall. Now we have the 2-story, so that has changed the architecture of the building. And the lower wing was not connected. You actually went outside from the lower stairs on a sidewalk and then into the 5th and 6th grade rooms down below. And then the entry is very different as well. And so tagging on to Director Vidal, the safety and technology that renovations would provide for our students, our staff, and family could meet several federal restrictions, as mentioned in the memo, that could become cost prohibitive. And my husband, who's in construction, there's a lot of times where you have an urgent need to change or to address some construction issues to make the school safe, and you don't have time to put it through the review and then possibly having to order special materials that meet the federal restrictions if it is designated the National Historic Registry. And because we are wanting to make sure that there's a good use of taxpayer dollars, this could become prohibitive for Bolton to even maintain itself as a school because of the materials and the labor and then the review process and the timing. So I love Bolton. I went to the open house. It's a wonderful school. It's a wonderful community. And I don't feel that the National Historic Registry would be more of a restriction on our school district growing than helping it as a benefit. So I would like to maybe, engage more with the community members, like a more representative group, and explaining to them what this means. And then as this administration building is on the historic registry, are there any things that you could share that because of the restrictions you weren't able to upgrade? And I know it's different because we're not housing students here, so we don't have to have the same, safety measures, and we don't have, it's not like utilized with just like activities and extracurricular activities.
Yeah, I won't, I'm sure there are many examples that I'm not as privy to, but a few come to mind for me. We had restrictions on the window replacements for these buildings and the aesthetics around that. This used to be, for those who may be watching this, or this used to be a schoolhouse building. And so it does have that historic significance within the history of West Linn, this area. Our HVAC system is I don't think the technical term clunky is on the vocabulary, but we have several systems in this building and we all just adjust to them as adults. Additionally, I recall a situation where the two aesthetic columns in the front of the building needed to be replaced for their integrity and, fully replaced. And upon the permission of the review board, it was, we could not replace them, but we had to get the exact type of wood and carve out where the compromising pieces were and almost like a puzzle fit back in and then aesthetically kind of match the new to the existing. In other words, total replacement, not possible, but work with what was existing there. So the time on that, the labor, and then just the attention to something like that, for a building this size that has the type of activity we have is perhaps doable. But that type of scale for an active school building is just something that we have a concern about. And I do want to clarify that it's not that improvements can't happen to Bolton. It's just there's another process that it goes through rather than a current process around any type of remodel is, staff evaluates, we get contractors in, we have professionals who do it. If there's permits that we need to get from the city, we get those. Being on the historic registry means not only that process, but permission through what's called a historic review board. And they may say yes to some things, and this is a volunteer group of people that do change over time, or they may say no to something, and what they approve or don't approve is what then holds. So I just want to have clarity that it wasn't that things couldn't get fixed. It's just that now there's a governing body, not just the board or a city group with zones and permits that would be giving permission around any type of change to the building. And the historic, board or preservation board, their intention really is to preserve. That's not a criticism. It's just a role they play is around if this has now been designated that they're going to do everything they can to preserve that. And so they'll be caught in a difficult position around a building that's being actively used and maybe wanting to do something, and their role in preserving something to circa 1952, which, we all know has, is just a point in time and has datedness to it. So I just want to clarify that piece.
Is there more comment? Director Salvaggio.
So just fair notice, I'm going to start out in one direction and then wind up where everyone else is, I think. I live in the Willamette Historic designation and in West Linn, and it is lovely, and it's a little sub-district in the city that puts its chips on preserving the look and feel of the area, and it's great, and people love it, and it's really neat. And the difference here is that is the purpose of that district, is to preserve that. We are not a historic district. We are a school district, and Oregon Revised Statutes Chapter 332 instructs us that we are responsible for educating children residing in the district, period. Anything that's contrary to that mission, I'm not going to support as a member of this board. And while I see the value, obviously, in historic preservation generally, I see it as an abrogation of our fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers if we're taking an asset and essentially restricting the use of that as an educational facility in whatever way, shape, or form. I don't think that's consistent with our mission. And I don't want to restate what everyone else here has said. Very flattered that the community members are interested in preserving it. It's certainly a nice thing, but I don't think that the district can, with a straight face, say that it's within our mission to kind of enter the sphere of historic preservation when we have taxpayers that are counting on us to take their hard-earned money and efficiently and effectively figure out a way to use that to educate their kids, not to preserve historic buildings. I would go further than the district's existing position on that. And if there is support on this board, I would be happy to motion that the district actively work to oppose the designation, frankly. But if there's not, I'm happy with the district's current, I don't know how I would characterize the current position, but happy with that.
Director Wyatt?
First a question and then a couple comments. Are you aware, or throughout this process, are you aware of any facility that's actively being used as a school that is on the historic registry? Because I mean, obviously people have been to, facilities that are former schools that are on the list. If you've been to the Kennedy School or, any of those types of places that have been turned into something else. But are you aware if there's an actively used school that's on the historic registry?
Yeah, I can't speak with certainty about, I do know there are some schools in Oregon that have found their way on the historic registry. Some are very small and rural. And I think there may be one or two in Portland. When that happened, the year they were placed on that registry, I don't know that. I think that would be an important context, because certainly today with safety and security, I think it's not something that a school district would actively pursue, but perhaps 40, 50 years ago, if it came to a school board or a district, they may not have been, couldn't foresee the complexities. There's also the possibility that a school that was placed comes off the list. If it needs to make changes, and if the local historic board approves those changes, it can then remove that designation. So doing an internet search that shows a few schools on there, I would have to actually, for certainty in answering that question, follow up with those schools and see, are you still currently on the list? As we know, the internet sometimes doesn't have the most current information within its search engines around if it's still being active, because if changes are done and then it comes off the registry because it now no longer qualifies, that can happen, as long as the local jurisdiction and the state jurisdiction understand and don't oppose that. That is a process that can take place. So I don't know how to accurately answer that.
No, that's fine. And I think, one thing that I'm really proud of, and I think I can speak for the full board, that we're all proud of, is that even with the schools that were consolidated, they're being used for an educational purpose in our leases to the education service district and then also to a preschool. And so thinking about, making sure that the facilities that even we rent as the landlord, I want to make sure that we have the ability to say, yes, we want educational purposes in these facilities. And we also want to make sure that those kiddos are safe as well. And so, and I think the last thing that, after hearing my fellow board members share their ideas thus far, and especially Director Salvaggio's point about the purpose of a school district. And I don't know if this would ever be appropriate to share in our testimony back to the SACHP or SHPO, but I find it challenging. I know that our public facilities are owned by everyone in our district, but we are elected for a reason, and we are elected by a majority of the people in our district. And so for us to not be part of a nomination and to find out about it secondhand just seems like a very strange process in our responsibility to take care of our facilities and to take care of our kids. And I understand that, this is not the only type of nomination that occurs. And I'm sure in 99% of the other cases, it makes sense that a concerned group of citizens can nominate another building. But it just seems very odd that as elected representatives, that are governing the school district, that we would be not included in that nomination, and now having to go through these steps and to hire subject matter experts and to have our staff time going into opposing something like this. I just think that perhaps that is something that from an administrative standpoint that these groups maybe need to consider. So.
Director Vidal.
I just wanted to agree publicly with Director Salvaggio and Director Wyatt. And I would like to piggyback on Director Wyatt's remarks in regarding the historic registry process, and just say that being informed that a building has been applied to be on the historic registry is different than asking board members for their opinion regarding placing a school building on the registry. So I would just like to point that fact out as well. So that's it.
I'm not going to add further comment. That was a robust discussion. I think the broad message, unless anyone wants to correct me, is that we support the district's position that opposes this being placed on the national registry. And I think that's clear.
I don't know if this is the place to ask, but this is the opportunity where the five of you can weigh in. And because this is the only time we've had this discussion collectively, now that you all are able to hear each other's opinions, and what I'm hearing is a collective approval of the stance that we've taken so far, and to continue with that. I'm wondering if the full board would be agreeable if perhaps the chair and the vice chair reached out and met with those who have nominated to then provide some information and say on behalf of now the board, because now you can perhaps speak on the collective opinion, just maybe for an explanation, not a criticism, but just an explanation of why it's hard for a school district to support this kind of nomination. I think sometimes just again, out of trying to be helpful or best intentions, community members want to support, find resources, find grants, do what they think is being helpful. And so in the spirit of that positive presumption, I'm wondering, now that you have a better sense of the collective opinion, you could speak on behalf of the board and perhaps meet with the group and give them an explanation. I think they deserve to hear that, and doing that in person rather than just in writing or watching a video of this meeting, I think would be helpful.
Yeah,
Some kind of
I
recommendation.
think that makes sense. I think as a path forward, that makes sense. I actually have no antagonism toward folks who I think were trying to do a really good thing.
Agreed.
And in truth, they want to honor a
Agreed,
building. And
yes.
I think Stafford community would feel the same way about their building. So how do we maybe honor those in a more formal way? Okay.
Agreed.
All right.
Agreed. And I hope that sentiment has been clearly communicated in this meeting. And for those watching, that again, we know our community is thoughtful and generous and always looking for creative ways to be solution minded. And I think that was in the spirit of what this attempt was. So.
Okay, Director Vidal, would you like to lead us in just a little discussion of superintendent evaluation? Did I miss something?
Item.
Oh, proposed update to board policy KL. Yes, thank you. And this is a discussion item, right?
Yes, so you're not making a decision today. This is a first read. This is me putting this on the agenda, but it does come from the delegation of the 25-26 board chairs, as well as this has been a topic from even previous board chair and vice chair leadership as we've worked through public complaint processes. The documents I'm giving you today and putting out there are, again, for transparency, for the public to know that this is coming up, for them to provide comment, as you heard already tonight. Written comment can always be provided to a school board, and then this will come back on the docket in August. In that in-between time, you're welcome to reach out to me if you have further inquiry about anything that presented, but it's getting the conversation started and for you to know the intent of district staff and the delegation of the board chairs is to update this policy. What will remain in place is that we do have procedures for public complaints. That's not changing, that we will abide by statutory requirements around public complaint processes. Outside of statutory requirements, school boards and school districts can adjust their processes differently. So they do vary in places. What we are proposing is to add some additional language in the policy itself. The original policy is quite slim, that we think should be placed in the policy and not just the AR, so that you'll see the addition of that with those steps to clarify the role of the board in public complaints and really the role of the board. And some of this is to hear a formal appeal of a complaint. So we're just clarifying that. As you know, you are privy to, I think, every single complaint that has gone through the process has also been emailed to board members. So you are aware of them. You have the opportunity to always engage the superintendent in learning more about them. And so that is still in place. The public comment process in a board meeting still holds some opportunity for complaint around programs of the district to be heard. As you know, it's limited around specific names, but that doesn't stop a board from receiving something in writing that further explains that concern or complaint. Additionally, all board chairs are privy to complaints that come to the superintendent level, and so there is involvement still there, whether it gets appealed to the board formally or not. So we've added some more language in the policy itself, and then with that addition, then it did mean changing some aspects of the AR, which I was able to edit last minute last night and this morning. So I do have that to hand out to you as some revisions. What you vote on is the policy. The AR is the superintendent implementing the policy. So just a clarification on that. So the board will be voting on the policy, but you'll get to see the AR that accompanies that. We also are adding some language around our charter school. That's not something we've specified in the past, but should that come forward, we felt that needed to be clarified. We've added some language around the difference around when there's allegations of misconduct, and then now we have legal rights that get involved around privacy issues as well as collective bargaining, and just making the public more aware of that, because that becomes a constant confusion. And then also some language around when other agencies start to get involved. So sometimes we get a complaint through KL, but then it's also submitted to the Oregon Department of Education or the Ethics Commission, and they have their own timeline and processes and procedures. And now we've got two of these that start to bump up against each other, and they either confuse the complainant or become something that actually exacerbates the situation, because now we are subject to some of those outside agencies' timelines and procedures, and that's not understood by our public. So this is something that a lot of districts are working through as we're seeing increases around public records requests, complaint processes, and through legislation now, these agencies have updated and actually increased their systems, whether it's TSPC or ODE or what's called OTIS with investigative processes, which has then been pushed back onto school districts to update their systems and make sure we're not in contradiction to each other, but actually stepping back when we need to. So it's not that we want to remove a board from some of these appeals, but what's happening is some that are coming to that level already have either attorneys involved or ODE involved or special education timelines and federal components to them. Because when they get to that level, they are often complex and haven't been resolved through these other steps along the way. And increasingly more board members are saying, I don't think it's at our level that we should be now interfering or engaging at this component. So again, it does not stop any parent from emailing the board and letting them know everything they're concerned with, or speaking at public comment and generalizations, or wanting to have coffee with any of you, or have a phone call conversation with you to continue that communication. Just in the essence of time and knowing that we'll have a much more robust conversation in August, because you'll have the time to look at these documents, to query me over in the next few weeks if you have more questions. Do know that the draft language here was taken from existing vetted documents using the same attorneys for a neighboring school district that just recently updated theirs. So I started there. They use the same legal counsel, Miller Nash, as we do. And in fact, our attorney had recommended that we look at their public complaint process because they had just gone through it and updated it. So all of the language here is taken from a neighboring school district that has already had that language vetted with our same legal counsel and the same key person who will be working with us on it. She started working 2 or 3 years ago with that school district and updating it, and recommended that we begin that process as well. And with that, if there's any direction or information you feel you want me to be able to bring forward for August, you can either let me know now, or you can certainly email me in the coming days, weeks.
Director Wyatt.
Having served on board leadership and seen and gone through different complaint processes, sometimes as the designee on behalf of the board chair, I definitely hear and understand the when it gets to that level, the need to have legal counsel and kind of a higher level of expertise really becomes apparent, and it almost feels scary as a board member to be navigating in those waters. However, I am interested in a way that we make sure that the policy recognizes that when a parent or when a family has a complaint, they want to be heard, and we as a board want to hear that. And so I'm wondering, and I don't want to wordsmith, from the dais, but I'm wondering if there is a way that language, either in the policy or the AR, affirms that the board will continue to know about complaints and will be actively involved, but maybe not in that decider role, or in that role when it starts to get into those really kind of intense legal scenarios. And so I don't know the best way to do that, and I would defer to you on if it's in the AR or if it's in the policy, but just providing that reassurance that the complaints are heard and that we are aware of them would be really important to me.
Yeah, and I think the nuance is in that phrase that the board will be actively involved, because to be a board means all 5 of you are together.
Great point.
And
Thank
once
you.
you're together, it's either in this public meeting or executive session, and it's now escalated to an intended action to be taken on by the board. So I think that's why, it may not be the full board, so maybe we have to specify
Okay.
board chair or vice chair. If you are emailed and and the complainant has emailed all of you, you have received information which keeps you informed. But for the board to be actively involved would be another level of expectation.
Clarification. And yes, that is not my intention. I think it's more, it's really about that sense of that we are not being bypassed. And so if it is just board leadership, I am fine with that.
So I've made a note of that, and we will work with our legal counsel on some language that we can bring back that does communicate to our public that we're not hiding things, but here are some avenues in keeping the board informed, and that the board always has the ability to communicate or to engage with the superintendent on any complaint that is brought forward. So we'll work on a way that allows for, I think, what we heard today in public comment, but also what you're referencing this time.
Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. really appreciate the clarifications here. I think that I'm very much in favor of more specific instruction that I see here in the board policy and also in the AR. I do want to make a few notes though, but so that, I'm just going to put my opinions out there between now and August. There seems to be a lot of narrative and value statements here. And to the degree that we can minimize that so that this is really more instructive and describing a process as opposed to describing a philosophy on complaint management. I personally would appreciate that. For instance, it starts out with the sentence, the board takes the concerns of the public seriously. That's usually the case, but I can tell you right now that there are some complaints that I do not take seriously. So I don't want to start making broad generalized statements in a board policy. I also want to echo what Director Wyatt said and what Mr. Clark said about making sure that as much as we're outlining what the board's role isn't, we still outline what the board's role is, whether that's active or passive. Because I think that, like Mr. Clark said, there is a role for the board in kind of identifying what patterns are happening and determining whether or not that merits some kind of response to, for instance, if the district is, resolving, 20 complaints a month about someone getting hit in the face with a banana cream pie. I love that those complaints are getting resolved, but if the board's not hearing about that, I feel like we got to answer the question, like, who's bringing all these banana cream pies to school? Where are they coming from? Because clearly there's some kind of upstream banana cream pie issue. So I think that's just my general philosophy on that. That's all.
Mr. Vidal?
Thank you so much. I was wondering, I would like to preface my comment by that I don't know if this is a good idea or not. That's up to Andrew Kilstrom and Dr. Ludwig, but I liked when we did the anti-racism policy, we had a roadmap of how the complaint process works. By roadmap, I mean that graphic representation. And we, as just serving for vice chair for a year alongside Director Sloop, we were involved in this process the whole entire year. And a lot of times parents and caregivers did not know the process. And I think sometimes, I'm just speaking from myself, that a nice graphic representation like a roadmap with cute squares or something like that could be really helpful to parents. Like, if this, then that, or, so that is my suggestion. I also wanted to agree with Director Salvaggio. I really like the idea of reviewing public complaints, complaint trends. I don't know if that belongs in policy language or AR language, but that's just feedback for the administration about how we'd like to be communicated to, at least myself, about certain trends. So that's it. Thank you.
So I just have a couple of quick comments. In this complaint process, very few families actually used the complaint form that was on the website. It was more or less an email. And by the time it reached the board chair, it was a very brief email because they had already shared several emails with administration or a principal or teacher. And then also the emails that went to the entire board, some of those were already in process where we were received a response from admin saying, hey, we're already working on this with the communication, and we've reached out to the parent and we're working with the parent. And then I did receive some where they just didn't follow, as Director Vidal said, they didn't follow the proper channel, where I had to direct them back and say, please share this with your teacher, or if you did it with a teacher, have you done it with the principal? So I agree that we need a more revamped complaint process and a similar roadmap so parents in the community know what steps they need to do and what those expectations that they can look for. Because I think the 2 or 3 that I did respond to go to ODE is because they had already set in motion that they were contacting ODE, or they had a lawyer, or they had contacted TSP. And so by then it's kind of out of the control or ability to have it appealed to the entire board.
Have much to add. I'll just say that I don't think there's anyone on this board who's interested in a policy that would change how much we know, right? We absolutely, I'm hearing that consistently. So if that's a perception that this policy in some way limits what we know, we're not interested in that at all. I generally don't like more language where less is appropriate, but you can see that there's a lot of language here, but I think it's necessary that we have more language, accepting that there may be some tweaks. I think for the interest of transparency, very clear language around this is our complaint process is great. So I'm supportive of that.
And I just would like, for perspective taking, to say that 99% of the issues that come up are handled indirect or directly, informally, with a teacher at the principal level, as they should. And they happen all the time. So those kinds of trends, principals are tracking, we're tracking as a system. They don't even rise to the level where there's an appeal up here to the district office or myself or the board. The ones that do, in that very small percent that do come up and then start to engage an investigation at this level or by myself, or then come to the attention of the board chairs, typically are complicated. And otherwise they would have been resolved, or emotional, or do have a component where we need to sit up and pay attention. But there's a lot of factors going on all at the same time. And sometimes even other agencies that then have been reached out to, or other advocacy groups. Sometimes not, but generally do. And so it's a delicate then working through our process as well as maybe others. I will say that as the law stands right now, we can't force somebody to use that form. We can't force them to go through that roadmap exactly, but we can let them know that is the process we're working through, and hopefully they stay with us and understand that it's there for a reason, to keep trying to find resolution all along the way and options to resolve it. But there are times that folks just jump straight to the board or straight to ODE, which then kicks it back to us, and we're in a different place on that roadmap. So it is to identify for our community how we will want to work through it, but we cannot, force someone to not email the board right away. And as soon as a written formal complaint is received, whether by email or in a letter, that actually constitutes the beginning of that timeline, not necessarily a form. A form helps us to track certain things and to look at trends, and to get all the information we need, but it can come to us in any format, written format. All right, so again, you have several weeks. If you think of some things, what you feel you would need in order to have a robust discussion in August and to make a decision, that would be great. And know that I'll be reaching out more to legal counsel between now and then. So anything that you would like me to ask of legal counsel, please let me know. Thank you.
Further comment or?
Yeah, just
Yes.
very briefly, I forgot one of my things, again, reading it in the wee hours. It looks like we've restricted people who can make complaints to a certain list of people, but that does not include taxpayers that do not reside in the district. So if I own property and I'm paying taxes in the district, but I reside outside of the district, and I think just as a fundamental issue of fairness, someone's paying property taxes to us, they should probably be on that list.
Thank you for that reminder. Can you follow up with that as a question? I'll make sure that I share that with legal counsel too.
Okay, we are at Director Vidal's discussion of superintendent evaluation.
Yes, so I, as the former vice chair, I am going to read comments and executive summary of the superintendent's evaluation for the 2025-26 school year. The Linn-Wilsonville School Board, who will be referred to as the board in these comments, has one employee, Superintendent Dr. Kathy Ludwig. Evaluating the superintendent is important to our students, community, staff, and administration. The board thoughtfully and critically analyzes the superintendent's performance throughout the school year. The superintendent's evaluation process began in July 2025 during the board's goal-setting retreat, where board goals were established. The board conducted formative evaluations in November 2025 and May 2026, followed by a summative evaluation in July 2026 using Oregon School Boards Association, OSBA, 8 standards that are rated on a scale from 1 to 4. In addition, Vice Chair Megan Vidal and Director Dan Shoemaker received feedback from Dr. Ludwig's cabinet members in April 2025, using the same OSB standards the board uses to evaluate the superintendent. A successful evaluation process strengthens the board and superintendent's relationship by building a shared understanding of expectations and ensuring public accountability. The 8 OSB standards overlap in a number of instances, which is why the superintendent will receive duplicative feedback throughout the evaluation. At today's meeting, I'm going to share the executive summary of the 2025-2026 superintendent evaluation. The superintendent's contract was approved for 3 years from June 2025 to June 2028 at the board meeting on June 18th, 2025. Board action on the superintendent's contract will occur in the 2027 to 28 school year. I have a correction I'd like to make. I'm so sorry. I mentioned that the cabinet interviews were in 2025 and they were actually in April 2026. I apologize. Now I will continue on with the evaluation's executive summary. The Linn-Wilsonville. Oh my goodness. Apparently I'm making a number of mistakes this morning and I am a morning person. For the record.
I didn't catch them earlier either.
I'm so sorry. Well, I don't know why I didn't. So the contract is 2026 through 2027. I apologize, Dr. Ludwig. Okay, I'm going to now read the executive summary. Hold on to your hats and glasses. All right. So the budget challenges, as we know, budget challenges dominated the 2025 to 2026 school year. The Linn-Wilsonville School District, which will be called the district throughout this executive summary, incurred a nearly $10 million budget shortfall preceding the $15 million budget shortfall it experienced in 2024-2025. The board made the decision to close Bolton Primary School and Stafford Primary School, 2 schools in West Linn, and open Frog Pond Primary School in Wilsonville in 2026-27. The board is grateful to our community for the passage of the capital bond, which funds repairs and improvements to facilities and fields and provides updated curricula and technology, as well as helping to fund existing capital positions, alleviating budget pressures on the general fund. The superintendent evaluation consists of 8 OSB standards. The superintendent improved her scores in 5 or 63% of the OSBA standards. The greatest increase was for effective financial management, and the most opportunity for improvement is for policy, governance, and advocacy. The board commended Dr. Ludwig for her visionary leadership and alignment and achievement of district and board goals, including the passage of the capital bond. Improved communication and trust building with the community is needed and will be noted throughout the evaluation. Board members recognize Dr. Ludwig's ethical leadership, professionalism, and consistent communication with the board regarding policy and legal matters. Dr. Ludwig's focus on equity and inclusion continues to be a strength. The superintendent led an examination of the district's inclusion model by holding listening sessions at every school and included small groups of students, parents, and caregivers and board members in providing assessments of the district's inclusion model. The board suggests obtaining more feedback from caregivers and parents as we continue to evaluate the district's inclusion model. In addition, the superintendent provides culturally responsive instructional leadership. The board commended the superintendent's progress on reporting of comprehensive achievement data and analysis in her board reports and board work session. There is concern for how budget constraints will be experienced by teachers, students, and administrators, and their effects on achievement for all students. The board commended Dr. Ludwig for her high visible presence in the community. Board members request more structured and proactive outreach to share the district's success stories. The board values the superintendent for her astute financial and organizational leadership. Dr. Ludwig's collaboration with labor leaders and efforts to maintain a positive district culture are applauded. Dr. Ludwig continued to demonstrate strong financial leadership during a very challenging budget year. The board suggests clearer communication when explaining the budget and finances to the community to develop better understanding of the district's finances. Finally, Dr. Ludwig's continued advocacy at local and state levels is appreciated. Stronger local communication and connection will further support the district's long-term success. And with that, I am finished giving my executive summary.
Thank you. And with that, unless there are more comments, we are going to adjourn. And Dr. Ludwig.
Well, I just want to recognize and appreciate former Vice Chair Vidal on this thorough process throughout the year. It's ongoing communication, outreach to board members, feedback. Those formative evaluation processes are really helpful for me to know midstream what it is that you're noticing or want. So I have the opportunity to improve or correct or adjust course along the way and not just here at the end of the year what would have been helpful. So thank you for the extra time that does take for the vice chair as well as for all the board members to do that feedback. Clearly there are themes in the evaluation and of course they came up during the year. We know we made difficult decisions and trust needs to be restored, and that will be one of my first and foremost goals this year. How you do that is through persistent actions that show that we want to take care of the community and put students first, and be good stewards of our assets and our resources. So actions and presence will of course be most important. Communication was a second theme. How to make, how to get that in a timely way is always the challenge. Social media posts get out there often quicker than our breath in the air. And so that's an ongoing challenge, but we're looking for creative ways to do that and then to display that information in a way that feels understandable, whether it's about finances or access to information on our website or even for community information. And then the third goal that will be really paramount for our district this year, which is what you hear in that theme, every student, every class, every day, which is our theme this year, is around systems, calibrating our systems. We have a lot of very strong alignment. I think board members have mentioned that when they go to school to school to school, they hear a pattern, they hear alignment and consistency. But sometimes in those more discrete processes and procedures where there's been autonomy at each school around how they navigate that, we're actually going to move in a direction around more alignment and calibration and consistency. That came up from staff, that they're willing to let go of some autonomous decisions for some more collective processes and procedures. So we really appreciate that. And that will be the focus of this year. We've heard from the state that the quantity of school days and the quality of school days is important around attendance and mitigating absenteeism. So, that's some work we're going to do there to even increase our numbers in that area. They are above the state level, but we can do better, as well as other agenda items from the state that will be coming our way. So I look forward to this afternoon in our board retreat where you'll be able to further identify for me goals that you have as a collective group, and I can flesh out some more about our thinking of our goals on my end in the district. And I know that we'll find a way to have those dovetail, and I'm excited for the year ahead. The exceptionalism of this district is because we have incredible teachers and staff. We have amazing students. There are leaders at our school that spend an extraordinary amount of time and talent committed to the success of students in this district. So while I appreciate the accolades, it's really a reflection of 1,000 people in the district moving forward together, really doing the best every day for kids. And so any exceptionalism you see, that's their credit. And I am just humbled and honored to be associated with this district and to lead from this chair. So thank you.
And I just want to say one more time, we've said it in executive session, but thank you to Director Vidal for all of the work that went into this. I also heard often this year from Ms. Director Wyatt about knowing full well how much work goes into that and being appreciative of it. But I also want to thank the whole board for a full year's engagement in that process. And so thank you for your organization and all your work, but thank you for the full board. Okay, with that, we'll adjourn and we'll begin our retreat in whenever we get over there and get started, but rather soon. Thank you.